Hello and welcome to Material Girls, a pop culture podcast that uses critical theory to understand the zeitgeist. I'm Marcelle Cosman.
And I'm Hannah McGregor. And, okay, Marcelle, we are talking today about a hugely zeitgeisty, kind of book and movie series.
Ooh. Is it Harry Potter?
It might as well be. It's The Hunger Games.
Oh, yeah.
Might as well be in terms of, scope.
Yeah.
Amazingly, we've never talked about The Hunger Games before. This feels almost surprising, right?
I mean, I believe you, but I don't believe you. Surely we've talked about it.
I mean, probably in passing, but, never with any real focus. So I wanted to just ask, what's your relationship to The Hunger Games? You read these books? You seen these movies? What do you think?
Yeah, both. You know, I like to go to movies knowing nothing, right? So it's like, oh, there's a movie playing and I don't have anything to do, so I shall go to this movie. I wonder if it's good.
Oh, so you hadn't read the books before you saw the first movie.
No.
You went in totally
I went in totally
Hunger Games.
Free of expectations.
I wonder if this is about a competitive cooking show.
And I loved it. I thought the movie was so exciting and so good. And when I went home, I immediately wanted to know what happened. So I bought the entire series on e-reader because I was like, I need to know what happens. So
immediately. I don't have time to get to a bookstore. I need this instantly.
I need it. I cannot wait until tomorrow. And so I downloaded the books and I probably read them in under a week because I was so engrossed.
Yeah.
And then I continued to go to see the movies and generally speaking, really enjoy them. Really sad when Philip Seymour Hoffman, when he died and couldn't be in the final one. I think that's...
God. He's so good.
Incredible,
in this series.
Right?
He's incredible.
An incredible talent. R.I.P.
God.
Gone too soon.
What a genius.
Yeah.
So I've rewatched the first and second movies in the past 2 weeks. Do I fucking love these movies? I think I might love these movies.
Yeah.
And I have not rewatched them in a really long time.
Yeah.
I just kind of had put them in the back of my head as oh yeah, that was a thing. It was a cultural phenomenon, whatever. I just haven't really revisited it.
Yeah.
And rewatching the first two, I was like, I think these might be my favorite movies.
Wow.
I don't understand. These movies are so good.
Wow.
So I don't know. Watch out. Hunger Games I'm strongly considering now reading the two prequel novels that Suzanne Collins has recently released because I'm unfortunately, I think I'm extremely into this. And I say unfortunately because when I become extremely into things, it makes me briefly intolerable. But don't worry, I'll get over it so quickly.
I think I identify with that experience of I'm really into something. It's my whole personality now. That's very much how I do. So I get you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's time for Why This, Why Now, the segment that asks the materialist question, what are or were the historical, ideological, and material conditions for our object of study to become zeitgeisty?
Okay, so let's start with some context here and get some dates under our belts, shall we? So the first Hunger Games novel was published in 2008.
Whoa.
Followed very quickly by
Really?
Catching Fire in 2009. Yep. And Mockingjay in 2010.
That was so recent.
It's so recent. And then the first movie comes out in 2012. So this all happens in a very compressed period of time. And to sort of contextualize that, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows came out in 2007. So the first of these books comes out the year after the last Harry Potter book. And the Twilight novels were released annually 2005 to 2008.
Okay.
So we are in peak YA book series to film adaptation territory.
Okay. So with the glorious benefit of hindsight, I'm going to posit. The books were a success, right?
Yeah, they really were. It wasn't a surprise. I didn't know Suzanne Collins outside of the context of The Hunger Games, but she already had a significant career as a writer before this series. She was already a New York Times best-selling author for her previous YA fantasy series, The Underland Chronicles, which I had never heard of.
Maybe we should read them.
Maybe we should read them. They're in the same way that The Hunger Games is a sort of play on the Theseus myth, right? The Minotaur. The Underland Chronicles is a play on Alice in Wonderland. And it's about a kid who finds an alternate world underneath New York City. People liked them. Maybe they're great. But before that, she was a writer for Nickelodeon kid series.
Oh,
and she wrote on Clarissa Explains It All in the Mystery Files of Shelby Woo.
Cool.
This is somebody who knows how to write a script.
Mm-hmm.
Fun fact about her novels, they're all written in 3 sections of 9 chapters each, because when she started writing novels, she just brought in the 3-act structure that she'd learned from writing theater and TV previously.
Okay. So this is a person who knows how to write entertaining narratives for teens and you and me.
Yes. And somebody who's pretty good at keeping their eye on the market and paying attention to what's zeitgeisty. That's just a kind of writer, right? Who's paying attention to what's getting published, what's popular right now, what do people want. The Hunger Games was huge in a way her previous still successful books weren't huge. According to Publishers Weekly, by 2012, when the first film adaptation premiered, quote, Scholastic, who published the series, reported 26 million Hunger Games books in print in all formats, including the package trilogy and movie tie-in books. So
that's so many
huge.
Books. That's before the movie premieres.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. And the movie adaptations were, as we all know by now, also, from the benefit of hindsight, a huge hit. They turned Jennifer Lawrence into a household name. And they made a shit ton of money for everyone involved. The first movie, according to Wikipedia, cost $78 million to make and grossed $695 million worldwide. That's what we call a return on investment.
Wow.
Yeah. The series as a whole has grossed over $3 billion worldwide, making it the 3rd highest grossing film series based on young adult books after, guess.
The Bible?
No.
Harry Potter.
Film series based on young adult books. So what other series of young adult books were adapted into successful movies?
Veggie Tales. I'm just joking. It's Harry Potter. I know it's Harry Potter. You know I know.
And this is the 3rd. So what's the 2nd?
Oh.
Harry Potter's 1. 2 is?
Twilight.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Though in North America, that's worldwide. In North America, Hunger Games did better than Twilight.
Okay. So part of these movies being big is just that they were doing a thing that was really popular at that particular time, right? Turning popular YA book series into blockbuster movies and casting hot young actors in leading roles, right?
Yeah. So part of the why this, why now is they hit on a thing that was happening.
Yeah.
And they did it before the market became totally glutted with YA book series and their adaptations. And before streaming took the legs out from under blockbuster movies, et cetera, right? So these movies just hit at exactly the right time. But we, I think, also need to talk about the political context in which the books were written, especially because that is part of Collins' framing of her inspiration for writing the series. So she's talked about it being, informed by the myth of Theseus and this story of having to send your young people to go be eaten by a minotaur.
Yeah.
You know this myth, right?
No.
No time. Go read everybody, you can look it up on your own time. What I'm more interested in is this oft-quoted account that Collins gave in 2008 of where the story came from that I'm going to ask you to read for us.
Oh, my pleasure. Quote, one night, I was lying in bed and I was channel surfing between reality TV programs and actual war coverage. On one channel, there's a group of young people competing for, I don't even know. And on the next, there's a group of young people fighting in an actual war. I was really tired, and the lines between these stories started to blur in a very unsettling way. That's the moment when Katniss's story came to me, end quote.
So, assuming she's writing this book in, say, 2006, 2007, what might she have been flipping past on TV? On the side of reality, we've got Survivor is already huge, Big Brother, American Idol, America's Next Top Model. And on the news side, we're likely talking about the U.S. wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Marcelle, what can you tell us about the Iraq War, aka the Second Gulf War?
Well, I can tell you that we just did an episode about Pirates of the Caribbean in which we argued that it was a fairly transparent act of neo-imperialism that was ultimately about U.S. securing access to resources through military aggression under a very thin veil of protecting democracy and making the world safe.
Correct, because I took that from the script from that episode. It was also most modern wars, and like Colin's story about flipping past war coverage on TV tells us, an intensely mediated military incursion. And that's really important because the Hunger Games, especially the film adaptations, are all about the mediation of war and how it can be turned into a spectacle that makes the violence that would normally be unsettling and disturbing into something that is like appetizing and entertaining for viewers who are far removed from the material reality of that violence. And it's that aspect of the films, right? The fact that they're so interested in the actual question of how you mediate violence that I want to focus on for our discussion today.
Okay. That makes perfect sense because the whole point of the Hunger Games is that it's a show that people are watching. Like that's the case in the books, of course, but adapting that narrative for a visual medium immediately makes things meta. Like, how do you represent the act of representation and how do you show violence against children being glamorized without actually participating in that glamorization?
Yeah, a really tricky needle to thread. And those are the questions that people are asking. And by people, I mean film and media scholars writing about the Hunger Games. Because there's, as it turns out, tons of fabulous, juicy scholarship on this topic. So, as you and I and most people listening to this already know, the basic premise of the series is that we're in a dystopian future North America called Panem, which comes from the Latin for bread. You know that phrase, bread and circuses?
I do.
Which is like a phrase for like how you keep people complacent.
Yes.
So that's why it's called Panem.
Okay.
So in Panem, the wealthy capital maintains control over the populace by dividing them into districts according to the kind of labor they engage in, largely resource extraction, of course, and then ritually culling children from each district through an elaborate televised battle royale death match. Our protagonist, Katniss Everdeen, becomes the reluctant star of the 74th annual Hunger Games, and then the eventual but still reluctant sort of mascot of the resistance against the Capitol. So right off the bat, we have, as you already pointed out, this conundrum. How do we show beautiful movie star Jennifer Lawrence getting dressed up in elaborate outfits and kicking ass with a bow and arrow without becoming complicit in the glamorization of violence that the story itself is critiquing? But it's like you kind of have to do the glamorization that is the problem in the narrative.
Totally. That's really tricky, right?
It is tricky. And the degree to which the films do it successfully, I think, is really questionable, especially when you factor in Lionsgate's elaborate marketing campaign. Would you please read this quote from scholar Chloe Monastirolo about one of the conundrums in the marketing campaign?
Quote, Tim Palin, Lionsgate's chief marketing officer, who, detailing the creation of the trailers, reportedly claimed, and I'll do a little voice here because it's a quote within a quote, "We made a rule that we would never say 23 kids get killed. We say only one wins." Such a strategy of removing all images of the games from the trailers was partly imagined as a solution to the problem Lionsgate faced when trying to appropriately market a story featuring child-on-child violence to a teen audience, a potential perception problem in marketing, Palin explains. The issue was thus resolved by censoring the violent reality of the games in the vein of the mandatory propaganda film that Panem citizens have to watch before the reaping ceremony in the first film. End quote. Okay. Hang on. I said I was going to bring a hat so I could hold on to it. This is the first instance when I'm holding onto my hat. So the strategy that Lionsgate has to use to market this movie about kids murdering other kids is to veil the darkness and the violence in a way that ends up mirroring exactly the way the Hunger Games are portrayed within the world of the movies themselves. Okay.
Yeah. They basically have to mirror the propaganda campaigns of the Capitol to market these movies in a way that doesn't emphasize all the kid murder. And not only that, in 2012, we're at peak YA adaptation fandom, and there was a lot of immersive participatory fan content being developed. Think like Pottermore launched in 2012. So it wasn't just about what Lionsgate was avoiding, it was also about what kind of story they were telling to viewers to make them feel immersed in the world of Panem.
So, okay. Are you going to tell me that they had which district are you from sorting quizzes?
Not quite that bad, but I kind of wouldn't have been surprised. There were district-themed makeup looks released by CoverGirl in 2013 to promote Catching Fire. I pasted a picture of them at the bottom of the script for your viewing pleasure, Marcelle, if you want to scroll to the last page.
I gotta look.
Listeners, you will have to do a DuckDuckGo to see these for yourself, but you can see all...
No.
Yeah. This was the CoverGirl Hunger Games tie-in of all of the glamorous looks that are like a plot point in the films is that the tributes from the different districts have makeup artists and stylists who give them thematic looks associated with their district. And this very clearly is inviting you to also take on one of the district-themed aesthetics that are designed for children who are going to be murdered soon.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, Lionsgate got that they couldn't really ask viewers to identify that strongly with the districts.
Okay.
Because kids from the districts get ceremonially murdered.
Yeah.
So you know who they primarily position fans to identify with?
Is it the capital?
It's the capital.
Okay.
The home of luxury and opulence and outrageous drag-inspired makeup and fashion looks, and of course, home of the audience for the Hunger Games.
This feels so complicated.
So why don't you read this description of the marketing campaign for the first movie? This comes from scholar Mélanie Bourda.
All right. Quote, when fans first entered the interactive website, capital.pn.
Panem.
Oh, Panem. Yeah. They had to create an account. After doing so, they were given a virtual ID card with their district. This is essentially a sorting quiz.
Just imagine the district sorting quiz. Like, what kind of backbreaking labor do you enjoy participating in?
Would you say your hands are calloused or soft? Okay, so they're given a virtual ID card with their district. I'm continuing the quotation here. Virtually becoming an official citizen of Panem with direct access to the Citizen Information Terminal. Users could explore the website and discover information on the various districts and on the capital via Facebook accounts. These accounts offered official news from the 12 districts, their culture, and their inhabitants in order to immerse fans and potential spectators into the world of the Hunger Games. A 360-degree view from the train station where Katniss and Peeta first arrive in the capital allowed fans to take a look at the richness of the place. The users took the place of the characters and discovered the capital from their perspectives, allowing a mise-en-scène of the splendors and marvels of the world's people and places. Moreover, users could access and read an online magazine, Capital Couture, written by fashion journalists from the capital. This glossy and glamorous magazine, in the form of a Tumblr, offered insights on people from the rich city, their fashion habits, and their tastes. And, quote, Hannah, I have so many questions. Let me start with this one. How did fans feel about this invitation to identify as a citizen of the capital? Were they grossed out?
Some definitely were. Bourda describes how members of the Harry Potter Alliance, the fan activist organization now known as Fandom Forward, I think we did like a mini episode with them in the past. They created a counter campaign to Lionsgate's, drawing parallels between the movies and contemporary political issues like famine. Basically being like, these movies are about real things that are really happening to people and they shouldn't be used to market makeup. Like, that totally misses the point.
Yeah.
But to return to Monastirolo's article, some people praise the campaign as being like subversive and edgy, including Collins herself.
Okay.
Quote again, please.
Okay.
You're going to have to do a voice for Collins this time.
Ooh, a voice for Collins? Okay. Quote, Collins had applauded the ambiguous marketing, allegedly telling Variety in an email, "It's appropriately disturbing and thought-provoking how the campaign promotes catching fire while simultaneously promoting the capital's punitive forms of entertainment. That dualistic approach is very much in keeping with the books." Was that a good voice?
It was a great voice. I think it's probably deeply unrelated to what Collins sounds like, but that's not how I'm judging it.
Yeah.
I liked it.
Okay, thank you. I will continue the quote here. Lionsgate's strategy would appear then to exploit what fan studies scholar Matt Hills analyzes as the curious coexistence within fan culture of both anti-commercial ideologies and commodity completist practices. End quote.
So I went into the process of researching for this essay thinking I would want to focus on the hypocrisy of these advertising campaigns, right? This like really unsettling way that you are being asked to align yourself with the viewership, like in the Capitol. But there was something else in Monastirolo's article, which you just quoted in part from, and which is in the show notes, folks, if you want to look it up, that made me pause and ultimately change course on the focus of the episode. And specifically, it's this. I'm going to read it to you.
Okay.
Quote, "What is striking is that resistance is repeatedly shown as an action that requires the subversion of the means of entrapment into means of empowerment. In a system that appropriates individuals by claiming them as objects of visual consumption, defiance is possible through a subversive use of visibility." End quote. So what they're saying here is that in a world where the camera is a tool of war, the power of the image can also be critically reappropriated as a tool of liberation. But that you can't like escape the being made image. That is an irreducible fact of the hypermediated world of the Hunger Games. So I started to ask what it means for a major film series being released directly in the wake of the Iraq War to be engaging so deliberately with questions of how media can frame violence to make it acceptable and even appealing to viewers. And you know where that led me?
To our next segment and some theory.
Bingo!
Yay! This segment is called The Theory We Need. Hannah, I can't wait. I'm on tenterhooks over here. Tell us what theory we need to make sense of the relationship between mediation and war.
Yeah, there are so many places we could have gone here. I sort of realized as I was like falling in this research hole, I was like, oh, this is kind of what I wrote my dissertation about. I've been here before. So honorable mentions go to Susan Sontag on Regarding the Pain of Others and Simone Brown, Dark Matters, which is a fabulous book. I almost made the whole episode about Blackness and like the representation of Blackness in the films. We'll just have to do another episode. Okay. But I decided to go with someone who I've been thinking about a lot lately, Judith Butler. Oh. Specifically their book, Frames of War, When is Life Grievable? Marcelle, do you know this book?
I do know this book. I have a copy of it. Whenever I am anticipating needing to talk about Palestine, Judith Butler has a couple of things in particular that I find really useful, and this is one of them that I go back to.
Yeah. I have like one of the first printings, like an earlier version of it in my office, but because I'm sick, when I was researching this yesterday, I bought the ebook from Verso and the updated. There's like a 10th anniversary introduction in it where they like explicitly link this work to Palestine. It's not part of the original context of the book. Like they're really talking about Iraq and Afghanistan in the original book, but they explicitly link it to Palestine. So that connection is like very much there.
Totally.
So people who don't know this part of Butler's work, you might affiliate Butler more with their early work on gender performativity, like Gender Trouble is is generally the book that they're best known for. But for me, it's this later work on precarity and grievability that has been more foundational to my thinking and that I reach for more, much as you do, Marcelle. Frames of War essentially asks how the mediation of violence works to legitimize it by framing some lives as inherently ungrievable.
So talk to me about that. What does Butler say?
I've taken a little bit of a different approach to this because I find Butler's writing so juicily dense. So what I've done is I've chosen 2 passages for us to engage with. For each one, I'm going to ask you to read it, and then we'll spend some time unpacking what it actually says. Both passages are from the intro because this is such a dense book.
Okay. Quote, grievability is a presupposition for the life that matters. For the most part, we imagine that an infant comes into the world, is sustained in and by that world through to adulthood and old age, and finally dies. We imagine that when the child is wanted, there is celebration at the beginning of life. But there can be no celebration without an implicit understanding that the life is grievable, that it would be grieved if it were lost, and that this future anterior is installed as the condition of its life. In ordinary language, grief attends the life that has already been lived and presupposes that life as having ended. But according to the future anterior, which is also part of ordinary language, grievability is a condition of a life's emergence and sustenance. The future anterior, a life has been lived, is presupposed at the beginning of a life that has only begun to be lived. In other words, this will be a life that will have been lived, is the presupposition of a grievable life, which means that this will be a life that can be regarded as a life and be sustained by that regard. Without grievability, there is no life, or rather, there is something living that is other than life. Instead, there is a life that will never have been lived, sustained by no regard, no testimony, and ungrieved when lost. The apprehension of grievability precedes and makes possible the apprehension of precarious life. Grievability precedes and makes possible the apprehension of the living being as living, exposed to non-life from the start. End quote.
Beautiful. Okay, let's unpack.
So Judith Butler is a linguist, right? That's their original training, is it not?
Oh, I didn't know that. I mean, they're really interested in language.
Yes. And I know that this is the case for Chomsky, right?
Yeah.
And I want to say that I believe that there's a similar vocational or scholarly training or whatever. Because, yeah, Butler does always go back to the way in which our understanding of things, our understanding of the world, is embedded in language. And that's one of the reasons why their writing is so challenging for first-timers, because they are trying to write outside of those ideological linguistic frameworks, right?
Yeah. And so one of the things they're really trying to get at in this book is, what is the mechanism through which you recognize somebody else as also being a person like you, right? Like, they're interested in ethics.
Yeah.
Like, they engage with Levinas quite a bit later on in this, who's like, major theorist of ethics. They're really asking this, like, what makes me look at somebody else and say, you're a person and you deserve to live? And they're like, we can't assume that it's like, well, I'm a person and you're a person. Because, like, if that was the case, if being a person made us recognize that you also deserve to live, the world wouldn't be the way it is.
Totally.
Like, it's just patently not the case.
Yeah.
So, like, what's actually operating when you look at somebody and say, I see you as somebody who deserves life, whose life matters? And life mattering, they're arguing here, has a lot to do with the question of whether you will be grieved, because a life that matters is a life that will have been perceived as a life when it is over.
Right.
Right? So it's looking at somebody and saying, at some point your life will end.
Mm-hmm.
This is the future interior,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is like this grammatical tense of like anticipating a future when a thing will be done. So like
Mm-hmm.
by noon, we'll have finished recording this episode. By noon Pacific time, we'll have finished recording this episode.
Right.
Like future interior.
Right.
And so it's like looking at somebody who's alive right now and saying, when your life is over, whenever that is, it will have been a life.
Mm-hmm.
It will have been a life that people can then look back at and say that was a life.
Okay.
Because that is where grievability hinges on saying like, yours is a life that will be seen as having been a life worth grieving.
Mm-hmm. It's significant here that they start with the idea of like the birth of the child, right? So like the child that is wanted, their celebration, and that celebration implies that the life of that child is grievable because it will be grieved when it ends.
Yeah. This child is always already grievable because
Mm-hmm.
this child is understood in part in the future tense.
Mm-hmm.
This child will have a life that will have been a life.
Mm-hmm.
So grief becomes one of the hinges upon which that we can see other lives as also being lives that matter.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly, they say that we can see them as precarious life, which is also really sort of key to their thinking about grievability. This is a book. They have a 2004 book, I think, called Precarious Life.
They do.
I
have that too.
And also a very good book. And that one, you know, they talk a lot about how, again, this sort of like ethical recognition of like the grounds upon which we might build a world in which we care about each other.
Mm-hmm.
And like might build actual policies that are based on like the value of human life,
Mm-hmm.
can be based in this shared perception that life is precarious. So the shared understanding that life, by its very definition, is about exposure to violence. And that part of recognizing a life as a life that matters is recognizing that that life needs to be protected from violence.
Okay.
So we've been talking a lot about recognition. We're going to do one more quote also from the intro to Frames of War that's more explicitly about sort of the role that representation and mediation plays in like making lives grievable or ungrievable.
Quote, just as the matter of bodies cannot appear without a shaping and animating form, neither can the matter of war appear without a conditioning and facilitating form or frame. The operation of cameras, not only in the recording and distribution of images of torture, but as part of the very apparatus of bombing, make it clear that media representations have already become modes of military conduct. So there is no way to separate, under present historical conditions, the material reality of war from those representational regimes through which it operates and which rationalize its own operation. The perceptual realities produced through such frames do not precisely lead to war policy, and neither do such policies unilaterally create frames of perception. Perception and policy are but two modalities of the same process whereby the ontological status of a targeted population is compromised and suspended. This is not the same as bare life, since the lives in question are not cast outside the polis in a state of radical exposure, but bound and constrained by power relations in a situation of forcible exposure. End quote. This one's harder for me to wrap my head around.
Okay. Maybe we're starting at the end and working our way back with the idea of bare life, because that's important here. And they're referencing another theoretical concept from Giorgio Agamben, the concept of bare life. I didn't do a bunch more reading about bare life, but the context in which I initially encountered it was writing about the Holocaust. So the concept of bare life is a human who has been stripped of all personhood
Mm-hmm.
So we're distinguishing here between like the biological fact of being alive and the legal status of being recognized as a person. So a human who is no longer rights-bearing, who is no longer perceived as part of the polis, part of the collective, part of society, who is reduced to the mere animal fact of being alive.
Mm-hmm.
And so not killed necessarily, but stripped down to bare life. So one of the distinctions that Butler is making here is between the kind of regime that casts out, which is the creation of bare life. You're cast outside of the polis in a state of radical exposure.
Okay.
Right? Because we've been talking about like the perception of a life as grievable, as counting, as mattering, is recognizing that life is precarious, which is to say recognizing it as needing some sort of care to keep alive. So radical exposure is like, we don't recognize you as deserving anything to mitigate your precariousness.
Okay.
Right? You'll just be exposed to death and disease and starvation, and that is allowed to happen to you.
Okay.
And what they're saying is distinct about contemporary military operations is that power relations operate through forcible exposure. So through deliberate representation, you're not cast out, you are pulled into regimes of understanding. So it's like you're not outside of representation, you're like right smack in the middle of representation. And the way you are being represented is part of the military apparatus that renders you disposable.
Okay.
So they're like, cameras are part of how war works now.
Okay, so if I'm understanding right, what Butler is doing here by gesturing to bare life is separating their own analysis here from this pre-existing theory about exposure that comes from Giorgio Agamben, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's this idea of bare life, and Butler is here saying, when we think about the way in which cameras, for example, are now part of military, we're not talking about bare life anymore. We're talking about a new thing. We're talking about a new way in which the human body is stripped of its personhood and humanity.
Yes. So they're essentially saying that lives are rendered ungrievable, not through a lack of representation of those lives, but through a military regime that seizes control over how those lives are represented.
Okay.
This matters to them, and it matters to me as an intervention, because there is a tendency for those of us who study culture to say that, like, representation matters. The more we see, the more we'll care. And they're saying it's not that simple. Like, we've actually got now a whole 20th century and 21st century history of war in which representation has been front and center. And we've got ample evidence that, like, some representations can shock us out of our complacency. They write quite a bit about Abu Ghraib in this book, which, if folks don't remember, were the images of prisoners being tortured in a prison of war in Iraq in the early years of the Iraq War. And like the release of those photos, which weren't meant to be seen by the public, became a moment of like shock and distress. But that representation in and of itself is not sufficient to render a life as being seen as grievable. Because if it was, all of the representation that we get of the violence being done to people would make us not want that violence anymore. And we know that's not the case.
Right.
So it's not the fact of representation. It's the relationship between representation and power. It's the how of the circulation. It's the how of who has control. Longtime listeners are going to recognize this as a thing I talk about a lot, and I absolutely got this from Butler, is that what they're interested in are moments of slippage and rupture.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When the representational regime just slides out of place just slightly and suddenly the frame becomes visible.
Mm.
Those are the moments. Like, we can't get outside of the representational regime.
Right.
We can spot those moments of slippage that are like inherent to like living in this hypermediated world. We can catch those moments, and those moments of rupture are the moments when we can be like, oh, wait. The way that I have seen the world has been coercively fed to me by people with an investment in me seeing the world that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I can refuse that and see it otherwise.
But then it seems to me that learning how to recognize those ruptures and slippages and learning how to perceive differently, how to resist the frame that has been presented to us, that's hard, right?
Really hard.
There's no blueprint handed to us for how to do that.
No.
Yeah.
No. It involves the sort of raw, messy work of attempting to live ethically in a highly mediated world. Like, that's what Butler's all about. Like, they're at no point claiming, as so many people like to, that this is a simple activity, right? That it's like, oh, being a good person is easy. Like, just do the right thing. And they're really interested in, like, how does this become policy? Like, how do we get everybody on board with the premise that lives that you are being coercively convinced don't matter actually do? Like, what might the frame of such a politics be in the first place? And that is a really complicated question. And we have literally just read like 2 half paragraphs from the introduction to this book. So alas, we cannot spend all day unpacking Butler. So I'm just going to summarize sort of some of the key ideas that we've taken away. 1, the mere fact that everyone dies is not sufficient to frame a life as one worth protecting.
Mm-hmm.
That framing of life as worth protecting requires the understanding of that life as grievable, as a life that will have been lived. It's not the bare fact of life itself, but the grievability of that life that generates an ethical obligation to preserve that life.
Mm-hmm.
And a major technology of how lives are framed as grievable or ungrievable is mediation, literally in the context of modern warfare, cameras.
Mm-hmm.
Contrary to Giorgio Agamben's concept of bare life stripped of everything but the mere fact of its biology, ungrievable lives are constituted as ungrievable through their forcible exposure to regimes of meaning-making, including military policies and media narratives that make those lives ungrievable. Any questions?
When are you going to stop summarizing Butler and give us a thesis?
Oh, only one way to find out.
We are in the thesis segment now. Hannah, give me a thesis.
Here goes. The Hunger Games started out as a book series inspired by author Suzanne Collins' observation of the collapse in her own media consumption between reality TV and depictions of war, specifically of the Iraq War, which was being actively waged on screens across the US when she was first conceptualizing the series. The books are fascinated with the relationship between war and media, but that relationship becomes downright meta in the series' film adaptations, where we, the audience, become literal viewers of the televised Hunger Games. Lionsgate's ambitious, immersive marketing campaign took that meta-ness to the next level, actively encouraging fans to identify with the Capitol and thus implicate themselves in the act of looking. But even as the films and their surrounding media apparatuses generated this complex relationship to the mediation of violence, the characters within the films learn that they can only survive by manipulating their own forcible exposure to the Capitol's regimes of meaning-making, seizing the tools of their exploitation, the games themselves, to demand that the lives lost for the entertainment of the elite are, in fact, grievable. In this essay, I will...
Hannah, I'm going to need an example. I'm going to need you to give me something specific.
So I'm going to make us do something else a little unusual with this episode.
What's that?
We're gonna talk about a specific scene in the first Hunger Games movie.
I love it. I'm here for it.
You do love it.
I do. What scene, Hannah? What scene are we going to talk through?
Okay, so we are going to talk about the scene of Rue's death in the first Hunger Games movie. As a reminder, or for people who have just never actually seen these movies, Rue is one of the tributes from District 11, and Katniss immediately feels drawn to her because Rue is the same age as Katniss's little sister, Primrose, who was drawn as tribute and who Katniss volunteered in order to protect. And so she becomes very protective of Rue. And during the games, the two of them team up for a period of time, and then Rue is killed. And Katniss, in response, has a funeral for Rue, essentially. She lays her body out in a field and surrounds it by flowers. There's this like 3-fingered salute that's used in, I think, in District 12. I think that's the implication is like it's a specific thing to them. But she like looks at the camera and like salutes in a very deliberate insistence that like this death will not be allowed to go unnoted. She will not allow this death to be framed as just a happenstance of the games. This is just how it works. For this death, we are going to stop and we are going to grieve. And that moment of her intervening into the perceived grievability of Rue's life, we then literally see it spark an uprising in District 11. So like right at the heart of the beginning of the uprising, which becomes the major plot point of the rest of the series, is like the way that Katniss has like unwittingly sparked a revolution against the Capitol. And her act that sparks that revolution, that turns her into a figure of resistance to the Capitol, is an act of grieving, of insisting on the grievability of a life. That it's actually very important for the operations of the Hunger Games and the operations of the power of the Capitol within their, you know, meaning-making regimes of power, that these lives not be seen as grievable, that they be seen as disposable lives.
Right. So, keeping in mind that as viewers of the film, we're like in many ways mirroring the position of the viewers in the Capitol, right?
Yeah.
So we see Rue's funeral. We see Katniss grieving this little girl. We as the audience are recognizing her in this moment as a little girl who should have had a future and didn't. I'm not sure if I want to ask why or how. Maybe I want to ask both. How is our experience as viewers of the movie different from the experience of the citizens of the Capitol? And why is our experience as viewers of the movie grieving Rue different?
Yeah.
Because presumably, like the viewers in the Capitol also saw this and they felt something.
Yeah.
Because they love Katniss too, right?
Yeah. We get a lot more of that question of how the Capitol itself is being worked on in the second movie. Is really interesting in the second movie because essentially, like, Katniss has become this figure of revolution, and President Snow wants her, the power of her as an image to be snuffed out. He's like, we can't just kill her. We need to deprive her of her symbolic power.
Right.
And so they come up with this idea of, like, every 25 years, there's something called the Quarter Quells, where they can do things differently. And so for this Quarter Quells, for the 75th annual Hunger Games, they bring in all of the tributes have to be drawn from the pool of previous victors. And because Katniss is the only surviving female victor from District 12, she has no choice but to re-enter the games.
Yeah.
But a sort of presumably unanticipated side effect of this is that many of the victors from the other districts have been living in the capital and have become like enmeshed in relation with other people in the capital. And so when they are called back and repositioned as ungrievable lives, there's this like disjointedness, right? It's like, it's too late. You've already reframed them as mattering. And so now trying to like push them back into this category of actually these are lives that can be snuffed out for our entertainment doesn't work with the same ease, because people are like, no, I recognize these people. I know who they are. Like part of the capacity of these children to be framed as ungrievable is that we as aligned viewers with the capital have never seen them before they became tributes. So they came into existence for the viewership in their capacity as tributes, right? So they've been framed right from the beginning as belonging to this particular sort of realm of representation. And it's like these other tributes who survived, these champions, have like had an opportunity to mean things in a different way. They've had lives, longer lives, like a lot of them are adults. They've had lives that, like, it's too late. Those are lives that will have been lived. And people see that. And so we see a lot more in the second movie of like the capital viewership beginning to turn against the games and beginning to ask questions like, wait, can we cancel this? Like, are we actually allowed to say like, this is bad and we don't like it? We don't see that happening yet in the first movie, right? There's a sense that like, ultimately, the first movie doesn't show us how the capital responds to Katniss's framing of Rue as grievable, because what it's interested in is how that operates on the districts themselves.
Yeah.
Because those viewers, like, they're closer to being able to be radicalized, because what you're asking of like Rue's father watching the games to like see his own daughter as not grievable, like that is an ask that basically needs to be enforced with military power.
Right.
Like somebody's got to be holding a gun on you to get you to consent to the premise that your child is disposable.
Right.
The rest of the series is about fights of representation. Like it's about fighting over this terrain of how you render lives grievable. And so it begins with Rue, but like she's not sufficient for the people of the capital. And I was reminded as I was researching for this episode, I don't know if you remember this. Do you remember the pushback when the casting of Rue was announced?
Yeah, both Rue and Cinna, people were like...
People were mad that they were Black.
Yeah. Except that there's textual evidence in the novels that they are both Black.
For Rue, yes. I don't think Cinna's race is ever specified in the novel. This is like, I haven't reread the books, but that's what the articles say.
Okay.
Is that Cinna's like never specifically racialized one way or the other. So like with Cinna, it's a question of like, what default race do you assume when you read a character? But Rue is specifically described as having dark brown skin. It's just that people don't read very closely.
When people are racist, they get angry when they don't see themselves represented.
And in the book, Katniss describes her as looking just like Prim, except that her skin is dark brown and her eyes are dark brown. So like Katniss looks at this child and sees a child who reminds her of her sister who she wants to love. And like within the narrative, Rue's Blackness has no impact on Katniss's perception of her as grievable. But for readers, the link of Rue to Prim and the insistence that Rue is a figure of innocence and grievability made readers make her white in their heads.
Right.
And part of the way that people framed their outrage was that her death wouldn't be as sad in the movie.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, because in a white supremacist society, Black life is positioned as less grievable than white life.
Yeah.
So we even see in this like material creation of the film, in the process of casting, we can see the literal frameworks through which members of the Capitol, citizens of the Capitol, look at some lives and say, that's a life I don't really think, like, I won't really be sad when that person dies. We literally see like readers of the book participating in that same kind of process. It undermines any simplistic, like, read a book about Black people and you'll stop being racist, like these really pat ideas about representation that sometimes get trotted out, right? Because it's like your frame of what makes a life grievable is often going to be more powerful than, you know, a single image in a movie. But like, it's what the movies are about.
Yeah.
I think it's worth noting, you know, when we are thinking about how the movies are participating in critiquing, subverting, you know, ultimately at the end of the day, I think the movies are just thinking about representation through the acts of representation, right? So like we can't make any we can't make any simple claims that like, and therefore this movie will do this. It's like, no, it's a work of culture that is engaging with these questions. And, you know, part of that is the way that right from the get-go, the movie encourages you to identify with Katniss, right? Like we talked about, you know, people in the Capitol don't meet the tributes before their tributes, but like we meet Katniss. We get to see, we know her backstory. We know what's on the line for her. We know why she volunteers. We know what her day-to-day material conditions of her life are. And that's like information we are given so that she will be our protagonist. And it's information that, you know, citizens of the Capitol are not given because it's really important that she not be allowed to become a protagonist.
That's right.
Again, I'm having a blast rewatching these movies, but one of the through lines is President Snow has a granddaughter who begins to identify very strongly with Katniss as a character.
Yeah.
And you can see him being like, oh, this is really dangerous. Like identification with her, right? People want to wear their hair like her. They want to fall in love like she and Peeta have. Identification with her is like, we have let representation do something that we didn't want it to do. And again, it's that like going back to Butler, it's that like slipperiness that like this is a tool. The Hunger Games are a tool of control and subjugation. And also representation always has slippages and unpredictabilities. And it's in those slippages that like the revolution foments essentially in this series.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Rewatching these movies and reading this scholarship has made me think so much about organizers and activists in Gaza who are, and like the incredible centrality of smartphones in sort of the shifting understanding of the war in Gaza and the shifting capacity for people around the world to see Palestinian lives as grievable lives, like has been so intimately connected to people literally seizing control over representation, like getting their hands on cameras and saying like, we are going to have control over how we are seen and how our stories are told. Like it is also a battle of representation. And it's part of why these questions around like, where are we getting our information and what news media are you reading and what are you looking at and how are you looking at these images have felt so heated and intense because like a lot of the global revolutionary transformation of how we think about Palestine that's been happening in, you know, the past like 2 years has been waged over representation.
Yeah. I remember, I don't know which movie it was, whichever the movies came out in 2014. And I remember, again, like loving the movie, but being so angry at the same time because we literally have this movie where this protagonist is walking through a hospital that the Capitol has bombed. And the entire plot point of this section of the movie is pointing out how despicable, how morally reprehensible it is to bomb a hospital. And I remember seeing this movie like days after Israel had literally bombed a hospital in Gaza and being like, how are these things coexisting and nobody cares? Like, how is it that we go to this movie and we're like, yes, the Capitol is so bad. Look at what they're doing. But then in real life, in actual real life, when we learn about it, we're like, yeah, but Hamas was probably in there. So, what are you going to do? And now literally, like, there are like no fully functioning hospitals left in Gaza.
Yeah. Knowing's not enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like the mere fact of the violence is insufficient to make people care if that violence in their minds is a violence that is justified or doesn't matter because those lives are ungrievable. And one way that the, sort of U.S. imperial machine has rendered lives in Gaza ungrievable, has rendered a lot of lives in the Middle East ungrievable, is through the category of the terrorist.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is a life that will not have been lived, a life that is not grievable.
Yeah. Perfect end. Easily our most uplifting episode.
Listen, you give me an episode to do and I'm going to make it fun.
Material Girls is a Witch Please production and is distributed by Acast. If you want to do your district proud, head on over to ohwitchplease.ca for transcripts, reading lists, and merch, as well as our other shows, Gender Playground, a podcast about gender-affirming care for kids, and Making Worlds, a video podcast about sci-fi, fantasy, and the radical power of imagining otherwise.
You can also check out awitchplease.substack.com to read our excellent newsletter, or patreon.com/awitchplease to check out all our excellent bonus content, including the Coach's Corner segment that we will be recording in mere seconds, where we get to hear what Coach thinks about the stuff we just said. We're on Instagram and Threads at @ohwitchplease and on TikTok at @ohwitchpleasepod. If you are listening to our voices right now and you're thinking, I would like to see if that voice come out of a face, that's where you can do that.
If you want to see if we're grievable subjects, you
can
see us mediated on TikTok.
If you want to see us through the lens of a camera.
Our show is produced by Hannah Rehack, a.k.a. Coach. And thanks to the whole Witch Please Productions team, Gabby Iori, Zoe Mix, Malika Gumpankum, and Ruth Ormiston. Hey, and thanks also to Auto Syndicate for the use of our theme song, Shopping Mall.
At the end of every episode, we will thank all our new Patreon supporters and every member who has boosted their tier. You literally pay for this show to exist. You're doing it. You're doing it right now. We love you. Thank you. Our gratitude this week to Sarah P., Casey, Catherine J., Daniel G., Cassie S., Abby L., Lena, and Krista LT. We'll be back next week, because we're weekly now.
Gross.
With a whole new episode. But until then,
later, tributators.